if you follow DPP, then an image like the one you see on the screen right now is probably a familiar sight, and it's not something you like seeing particularly, unless you're one of those people who abuses Machamp, in which case I don't like you. But even if you don't play DPP, you can take a look at everything you're seeing right now, and you just intuitively understand how disgusting the whole affair is. It's just more intimate for those who are more familiar with DPP. So, because of Machamp bringing about RNG antics, like the ones you see on the screen here, although certainly not limited to that, it doesn't need paralysis, as we will examine. Recently, there was a survey, the yearly asking the player base, hey, what do you think is a problem? What should we do? Stuff like that. Those surveys don't necessarily lead to anything directly, but it is a good way of feeling out, what people are thinking at the time. So, for the first time ever this year, Machamp is on the list. I'm not sure quite what changed. I guess we just kind of realized, hey, you know what? Maybe we should do something about it. Because the ideas for a paralysis clause didn't seem to be going anywhere. I will link this thread in the pinned comment, so you can peruse it at your leisure, as always. But overall, I will go over the overall ideas before we get to the Machamp of it all. So, generally, people like the metagame. I might count myself among those people. So, you can look at these stats later, or you can pause the video and do it now and then come back to this video and watch it through to the end with ad block off. Oh, who said that? So, people like the tier, right? And I will offer an example viewpoint, my own, which is that as much as I think, something like Machamp should be dealt with, or I would love to get rid of Ironhead Jirachi, for example, even if nothing is done, I am perfectly content. More than that, I really enjoy the tier. I think the tier is fantastic. I think there's a lot to like about it, and I won't go further than that now because then this video would go way too off track. And it deserves its own video. More in the spotlight. Anyway, so the big one is, of course, what do you feel about Jirachi? And pretty much nobody considers Jirachi balanced, as you see from that 6.3%. Basically a crit, or a pre-Gen 7 crit. Yeah, they changed the crit rate in Gen 7. They changed crit damage in Gen 6. That's what I was trying to remember with my old man brain. Anyway, so what you notice, though, is that most people don't think tiering action should take place. 60, rounded up to 69% if you want to be funny / somewhat accurate. So the idea is Ironhead is busted, but we don't want to get rid of Jirachi itself. That is the viewpoint I subscribe to. Not to get too far off topic, especially because we're going to return to it later. I don't think the tier would completely collapse without Jirachi, but I do think that we would have some unpleasant consequences, at least for a while anyway. And I am noticing a lot of parallels to Black and White right now, because this video is about Machamp, and though Machamp is definitely not the most contentious thing in DPP, it is like Reuniclus, which is being tested in Black and White right now, in that you really could get rid of it without completely uprooting the fabric of the tier, and it is pretty messed up. So, not to give away where we're going with this, but we will explore why that is later. If something's good, spoilers shouldn't bother you. In general, anyway. That's a good rule of thumb I have found. I've known spoilers from several movies that I wound up seeing, and it didn't bother me at all. Anyway, you gotta see how it happens. You gotta see the details. So, moving past Jirachi, we're going past other things. People complaining about Clefable. But, most people... Actually, funnily enough, I didn't even look at these statistics. I didn't realize that only 31.3% of people consider Clefable balanced. I mean, I get it, but again, that's another video. I mean, I already have made that video, should Clef be Uber in DPP, but it's an ongoing debate, so we might have to revisit it. Anyway, not Clef. We will get into Clef's place vis-a-vis the star of the show today, Machamp, later on when we explore Machamp itself. Latias, split down the middle roughly, a little in favor of it being balanced, but not too far. But nobody. Here's the thing. Something might be unbalanced in someone's view, but again, they might not think tearing action should take place. So we saw with Jirachi, with over 90% of people saying, "Hey, this thing is not balanced," and then asking them, "So should tearing action be taken?" And the answer being no. So here with Latias, you've got over almost 50% of the player base saying, or the surveyed player base, who is qualified, by the way. They're not just polling any random idiot on the DPP ladder. These are qualified players. So they're asking them, hey, do you think Latias is balanced? And a lot of them are saying, no, not really, or just straight up no. And then you ask them, should anything be done about it? And it's also like, no. I'm sure there's something interesting to be read into. If you read into that, then you'll find something interesting, rather. But yeah. Yeah. So again, here's sleep. I don't love it, but again, most people don't think tearing action should take place. So now, these are subjects we've breached before. I think last year's survey had all of these. So now we get to the newcomer, Machamp. And here's what's interesting. 75% of people consider Machamp to be balanced. This is not too far off from... did I just say it wrong? Okay, let me just say it again, just in case I did. 75% of people consider Machamp to be unbalanced. I have a feeling I was just, saying half of what I was thinking and then reading the other half, so I wound up saying the opposite of what I meant. Who knows? Machamp has confused me. So, with 75% of people thinking Machamp is unbalanced, that's something you want to look into, at the very least. It's not necessarily the end-all, be-all, as in, hey, we don't think it's balanced, let's get rid of it. Otherwise, Jirachi would be on the chopping block, would have been on the chopping block for, or rather, a long time ago. But, yeah, and you also notice the main difference here, that 34.4% of people think that tearing action should take place, which is one more vote than Jirachi, I believe. So... we will get to the details of why Machamp is... because I wrote up a whole thread. That's where we're going next with this. But, yes, okay. It is the first time we've surveyed Machamp. But yeah, we're just going to give you the quick notes here. It's not broken, technically, but it is not a key element of the metagame. And therefore we would not miss it if it was removed, since all it really does is serve to add RNG to the game. And we will get into that in depth very, very soon, but I just wanted to give you the overview. That is the through line for this whole idea that we're going to explore. So, I have not read these paragraphs, honestly, because I was busy writing up my own thing. So then there was a contention with the Machamp decision, but we will. I will get to this. I'm actually going to write a response post to this very quickly after this video. But yeah. So now this thread I wrote. So this is the basis for where we're going in this video. Now, before we get into that, let's look at some more replays and establish Machamp's historical place in the tier. Even if you have not, or rather, Machamp is not only, hiding behind subs and abusing paralysis in the mid-game. It is also very famously one of DPP's best, most iconic leads. It's very difficult to deal with because before you get any chip damage going, rock, sand, spikes, whatever, then it has just enough bulk to where it can take on pretty much anything. And it also commonly runs Focus Sash, so you can't even OHKO it. There was a response to lead Machamp when it first popped up with things like CB Azelf, Specs Heatran, CB Dragonite, Specs HP Flying Zapdos, things like that, which would just OHKO it. Even Life Orb Psychic Azelf, very briefly. And then you throw a Sash on Machamp because nobody's going to dare to status it because it so commonly runs Lumberry, and then there you go. And the Lum stuff isn't really necessary in the same vein as it is to survive those things. So yeah, as you saw in this replay, we don't even have to go any further. it just messes multiple things up because of confusion. It's a hard hitter for sure, but the issue with Machamp isn't just that it hits hard, it's that it hits hard and introduces RNG into the equation. And that is a major, major difference from Jirachi. Jirachi is lots of RNG, but it doesn't come close to hitting as hard as Machamp. Jirachi has base 100 attack, and even if you max out its attack, a lot of sets don't, but let's just say, even if you max out its attack, first of all, you're running Jolly most of the time. I like Adamant Jirachi, but that's me. But at best, you are running 328 attack with an 80 base power stab move. And the stab move is Steel, by the way, which is nowhere near as good as Machamp coverage-wise. Machamp, 394 attack with Adamant, and it has a much better stab coverage and fighting, super effective and neutral alike. And it also has 100 base power on that stab as opposed to 80. So it's hitting so much harder. What this means is Jirachi, if we just take the examples on the screen right now, if Jirachi was trying to flinch out Skarmory and, let's just say Tentacruel here, which has been known to happen, flinching out resists, of course, but it needs to chain a lot of Iron Heads together. And something like Skarmory just roosting up erases all that progress. And you have a big window of time in which to do that, because it has to flinch you out over and over and over and over again. With how hard Machamp is hitting, as you can see, then it only takes a confusion or two, and then you're dropping. And you say, oh, well, that's a bulky defensive team, and, it's not hitting Machamp as hard. It's not pressuring it as much offensively. Okay, let's take an offensive team. And with this lead matchup, you see, not every lead is going to be perfect into Machamp. And Zapdos was so popular as a lead for a long time, specifically because it was so good into Machamp. But here you see a Zapdos switching in and getting D-punched, because D-punch is very, very free. And you think, oh, well, just run immunities. It's like, okay, so run Gengar or Rotom, neither of which beat Machamp reliably. Will-O-Wisp, first of all, if it's running Lumberry, then goodbye. Second of all, Will-O-Wisp is also the easiest thing in the world to take advantage of if it's forced, i.e. switching to Heatran. Which is a very popular Machamp partner. Even if you don't have Machamp or Heatran as a partner, then it is very, very manageable through things like Lumberry Jirachi, pivoting into Latias if it's Rotom, or Gengar, either way. But Gengar could Shadow Ball, whatever it is, you should be prepared for it. So this is just in the case of lead Machamp, by the way. The Machamp that comes out without any prior damage on the opponent, and it's still messing you up. Not every lead can afford to beat Machamp every time. So yeah, it just completely beats a Zapdos there. Takes very little damage. And now Colbur Berry Starmie is going to beat it one-on-one. It was also a popular lead because it could do this to Machamp. But, it can't switch in nearly as freely, so it does stuff like that. And again, that was just the lead Machamp. So the counterplay, yeah, the immunities, Gengar, Rotom, they mostly lose. And yeah, and nothing else switches into Dynamic Punch. Say, oh, we'll run a Lumberry to shrug off confusion. It's like, okay, name the Lumberry user. Whatever offensive Lumberry user is switching into Machamp just lost its own capacity as an offensive threat. Lum Jirachi, good, takes over half. Lum Gara, sure, but also not healing that damage off and no longer going to be threatening much of anything. And also, neither of them are immediately threatening Machamp out. What are other Lum users? T-Tar is a common one. No. That's another thing, by the way. Machamp has an easy time switching in, as we will see in a second. But let me not get sidetracked. So other Lum users. Dragonite. Yeah, that loses. So, yeah, we could keep going in this vein. So, yeah. Now, non-lead Machamp, as you see in this battle, then after a bunch of stuff happens, rocks and sand go up, and the whole idea of this team that I built for my buddy Roscoe, which he then used in this SPL match, is that what if you had lead Machamp, but rocks and sand were already up because they mess up its counters really, really brutally. So, yeah. Remember how Machamp switches in easily? Yeah, it switches into a Pokemon called Tyranitar very easily. And then that whole, as you see, rocks and sand are up, and there's not really such a thing as an offensive team, or a defensive team for that matter, that has a safe switch-in this situation, which is very easy to facilitate. Very standard battle conditions, as you can see. Send in Azelf, then send in T-Tar. The T-Tar isn't even necessary because if you don't get the T-Tar sand going, the Machamp isn't getting chipped itself. So, yeah, there's that. And Slowbro has been used. Yeah, own tempo, you don't get confused, and it's slower, so payback goes first. It's not as threatening. Yeah, I like Slowbro for the record. I think it's a good Pokemon. I like Slowking too. Not reasonable to suggest Slowbro or Slowking as an answer on every team. To say nothing of how Pursuit vulnerable it is. Just how Rotom and Gengar tend to be. So, not exactly the support you have to go out of your way to get anyway, either. Anyway, there's a Gyara confusing itself, and even this Machamp has Stone Edge because it's not in the lead slot, so you don't need Bullet Punch for Sash Pokemon as much. So I was like, let's throw in Stone Edge because it hits Zapdos harder than Ice Punch, and it also smacks Gyarados. It smacks bouncing Gyarados, by the way. That's really satisfying when Gyarados bounces up, and because of no guard, it's not semi-invulnerable, so you still Stone Edge it. That happened to me once in a tour game. Beautiful. Anyway, so yeah, you could very well just muscle your way through, even at -1, with constant damage and D-Punch confusion and all that. But with Stone Edge, you just make it even nastier. So in comes Breloom. This Machamp is -1 attack, by the way. And it D-Punches, and because it's fast as well. Confusion, and goodbye. So Breloom fortunately gets the Mach Punch off the second time around, so that Machamp is actually in KO range of things now. Previously it would have survived this Life Orb Gengar Shadow Ball very easily, but no. So this kind of Machamp I am a big advocate of, and there are a lot of different ways to use it. So this is an example. Note, by the way, how previously a lot of people will associate Machamp solely with abusing paralysis. And yes, I do dislike Machamp on paralysis spam. I think we'll get into it. But note how, people think, oh, Machamp is only that Paraspam Pokemon. There are countless examples of Machamp messing up the opponent without needing paralysis. Oh, because Machamp is naturally slow. Yeah, and it doesn't matter. If Machamp's slowness was a case against it, then it wouldn't be as good as it is. In the lead slot, it's not even working with any previous damage. So, yeah, now we'll go back to the thread and quickly go over the points that are being made in it. So, again, linked in the pinned comment so you can read it at your leisure. I am here mostly to highlight the main ones made and then elaborate on them a little. So, once again, as I said, I love the DPP metagame. I think it's great. Now, the second part I'm saying here is that there are elements whose removal would improve the game without completely changing it, and I believe we should remove these where possible. So, I understand that in past generation metagames, you do not have the body of players to make changes on the scale of a current generation, where you could just say, oh, well, let's ban insert big threat here and then see where it goes from there. It doesn't work like that. It's a past generation. We don't have the player base. We don't want to... in an ideal world, this shouldn't matter. Unfortunately, we have to make do with what we have. Life lesson. There you go. So, yeah. So the changes being made here are less, the ideal thing than what we can do to improve it, to prune it, let's say, without completely overturning it. So, here I also mentioned I would remove Iron Head if you gave me the option. However, after years of fighting this fight, I think I mentioned it in a video before, that the higher-ups just say no. Ban Jirachi or do nothing. No Iron Head, no 30% and higher flinch moves, nothing. So, yeah, it's a shame, but I would rather Jirachi stay than with Iron Head than remove Jirachi entirely. So, with that in mind, that is why we were focusing on Machamp rather than Jirachi. Because if you remove Machamp, it does not alter the fabric of the tier. And you're probably wondering, okay, well, how does that work? Well, Jirachi is one of the biggest defensive aspects of the tier, so much so that DPP used to have this reputation for being an unbearably offensive metagame. People would say nonsense like, I hope my last beats your last, this tier is too strong to not have team preview, I got swept by something I didn't know was there, how is this fair, blah, blah, blah. And it was moronic. And a lot of the people who were playing DPP at the time didn't really understand the tier. But the reason why you don't see those complaints anymore is because Jirachi is so good defensively that it shut those offensive teams down very, very well. And I don't mean because it Iron Head flinched them to death. I mean because his defensive profile is just that good. Even before those arguments started popping up, then there were sentiments among certain DPP players, myself sometimes included, that the punishment for switching in the tier was way too high because of Stealth Rock. So you had to abandon old styles of defense and go with Pokemon that were more robust into those kinds of offenses. And that's where Jirachi came in. So Jirachi really closed any potential floodgates for hyper offense, for certain bulky offenses that were double switching with Breloom. People wanted to ban Breloom, and Jirachi was that's one of the major reasons why you don't really hear that as much. That and physically defensive Skarmory and things like that. But getting off track. Or not really, no. That's part and parcel of the whole deal. So Jirachi is very important defensively. What does Machamp do defensively? We do not need Machamp to hold anything together in this tier. What we do use it for is it can check DD Tyranitar. It can check Tyranitar in general, but don't use it as a choice band T-Tar counter or you will regret it. And even as a DD Tar counter, if you have 5 DD Tar weak Pokemon and a Machamp, you are DD Tar weak. It does not take boosted Earthquakes nearly well enough and it also doesn't have the longevity to do. I mean, it's Stealth Rock resistant. Yeah, it also doesn't heal. I guess if it's like a bulky Rest Hawk Machamp, but that's not playing to Machamp's strengths. That's just using a worse DD Tar counter. Just don't even use Machamp at that point. So, yeah, Machamp is nice for helping you against DD Tar. It shouldn't be a band-aid for, gluing together an otherwise DD Tar destroyed team, but it is good for offensive teams because it completely reverses the momentum. It's good at taking its hits in fast-paced games. Fine, that's nice. And as far as defensive roles, that's about it. Machamp's bulk is nice. Like we mentioned the lead matchup thing, where it's just bulky enough to take hits from everything. I mean, the old lead Machamp was shrugging off Life Orb, Dragonite, Draco Meteors, for God's sake. So, and Azelf Psychics, Roserade Leaf Storms. So, it's bulky, yes, but it's not so bulky that it's switching into these Pokemon. It's good one-on-one, but actually getting it onto the field one-on-one is limited. And even switching into T-Tar, your best move to switch in on against T-Tar is Stealth Rock, as you saw in one of those replays. You come in on Stealth Rock because otherwise just even like a Crunch is going to cut into your ability to tank those hits when you're being revenge killed. It's going to cut into, if you're running a sub Machamp especially, you want a sub, right? Well, it's going to mess up your ability to sub as much. You like coming in on rocks or after it's pursued something, or on a double switch, of course, or off of a U-turn. But note how all these conditions are, not taking damage on the switch. Even something innocuous like Crunch or, uninvested Stone Edge or, I don't know, an uninvested Fire Blast or Ice Beam. They're not going to do a lot. But with Machamp's Stealth Rock and neutrality, resistance, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when it's not healing with leftovers and its bulk isn't that good and it's not that fast, it is important. So, its defensive use is T-Tar, but it's not a T-Tar, it's not a perfect T-Tar answer. So you're not using it to handle T-Tar, and pretty much nothing else, it's not as good into anything else as it is into T-Tar. It's good into Clef. You don't want to get knocked off if you're running leftovers anyway. Otherwise, it's good into Clef, but that's a defensive Pokemon. You don't want to switch into Seismic Toss for sure. It's good into Clef, but again, it prefers switching in on Stealth Rock, or a Soft Boiled, or a U-Turn, or a Double Switch. Same exact idea, and apply these to Blissey if you want as well. U-Turn Zapdos is a great partner with Machamp for these reasons, on Paraspam and on offensive teams in general. So, with that in mind, Machamp has very little defensive presence to speak of. Beyond that, the most you're going to do is, take advantage of the fact that it gets knocked down to low HP a lot, and then use a Custap Berry. That's very cool, but it's hardly essential. It's hardly unique to Machamp either. You can do the same exact thing with a Metagross or something. Or other Pokemon as well. So, Custap Machamp, very cool, big fan, offensively and defensively, but hardly essential. And the nice thing is, by the way, there is a solution that does not involve nuking Machamp itself from the tier. But in case you're thinking, I like these Machamp things, is it really so bad? Well, yes and no. It's not really so bad as in I think it ruins the tier single-handedly. I still love the tier, and I think it's manageable. However, I also think it is unreasonable to deal with in an RNG sense because a lot of what dealing with it entails is hoping for those coin flips. There's a lot of pivoting you can do into Machamp moves, but again, because of that just good enough bulk and its ability to smash pretty much everything in the tier for really big damage, it is very unreliable. And the more you switch around against it, the more it's battering you. So even if you manage to contain the Machamp, it's going to have left you with so much damage that you are going to be much easier pickings for its teammates. So, yes. Now, that whole idea about DPP has this reputation as a variance fest for stupid reasons for the most part. People who don't know what they're talking about, speaking nonsense. Oh, always click the not very effective move, bro, because then you'll hit something and it'll be super effective and you'll look like a god and you'll be amazing and this tier is nonsense. That stuff is stupid. The only place it really has any validity to it is Jirachi, but Jirachi is a lot easier to contain than Machamp, again, because it hits so much less hard. So it's hitting with much weaker hits. Good lord. I'm sorry, that was appallingly phrased, but please forgive me there. I usually take pride in my adroit handling of the English language, but not today, because I got punched in the face too many times by Machamp. So, yeah. Machamp teams are teams with Jirachi, yes, Ironhead, stupid, okay, but the teams that are really hated, that really, if anything, validate DPP's reputation as an RNG fest. I don't think they do it fully, but I get it. Are the Paraspam teams, and those are hated a lot more than Jirachi because they're a lot more dangerous. And the reason they're a lot more dangerous is because Machamp is KOing you before. Way too quickly. Oh, it only has 8 dynamic punches. That's all it needs. It doesn't even need all 8 of them most of the time because it doesn't need to KO your entire team. Just that one or two forced KOs or 1.5. The damage is going to leave you with so effortlessly when it comes in against these staples of the tier. Or off U-turn is going to leave so much damage strewn in its wake that you will have an easy time with the rest. Same idea that we just said. So here's the main issue I have with Machamp. So it applies to Jirachi as well, but I think it applies a little more to Machamp because of the fact that you get KO'd much faster by Machamp than Jirachi. When you have something that's this powerful and this has this much RNG behind it, it's not like Heatran Fire Blast burning its way through T-Tar consistently. That doesn't exist. And you say, oh, Lava Plume, but Lava Plume doesn't have the power of Fire Blast. So ignore the fact that I just tried to get into semantics, which was totally not the point. The fact is that even 30% is nothing compared to 50. And the fact is that you were getting KO'd very quickly by Machamp, right? So what this does is that it rewards bad play often. So let's take some examples. Let's say you have a pretty high percentage thing, all things considered. Starmie into Zapdos. You're like, you know what? I really want that Zapdos T-Waved. I have 5 Zapdos counters, let's just say, right? Let's just pretend. And they're all at full health. And I need my Starmie for other Pokemon. But you know what? I want that Zapdos paralyzed. And if they click T-Bolt, then I'm just going to hope for full para. Most of the time, when you make such a play, you will be punished for it. 75% of the time, that Zapdos clicking T-Bolt is going to delete your Starmie. Now, 25% of the time, yes, paralysis is also very, way too high for most people's liking, myself included. It's why I recently made a video about the silliness of paralysis. If there should be Paraclaws or something. But most of the time, if it's that or going for, let's say, the Heatran Fire Blast burn in T-Tar, that's low percentage stuff. Now, the problem with Jirachi, and especially Machamp, is that when you go for that Iron Head, or, Body Slam with Jirachi, or that Dynamic Punch against something you should be switching against, the odds are so high that you wind up getting rewarded anyway. So you can make a worse move and still get away with it. Be rewarded for it even, not just get away with it. You know the number of times I've seen a tournament game where some yokel, some yahoo, some complete idiot had 5 Heatran counters at full health and decided, you know what? I'm going to body slam that Heatran with my Jirachi. And the Jirachi was needed for a million things, and the Jirachi got away with it. And it wasn't just a body slam either. They just started iron flinching the Heat Train afterwards. It's like, oh, wasn't the fact you got the body slam on it enough? No, now you got an Iron Head. Because you got the body slam as a stealth rocks. I mean, that at least makes sense, but now it's just, needless risk. So, these putzes get away with, I don't know why I'm thinking of all these George Carlin words, probably because of the free-floating hostility I have for this playstyle. But, the idea is that you can make these moves which are worse and be rewarded because the RNG is just that favored for you, right? Hang on, someone's calling me and I cannot pick it up right now. Good Lord. Come on, leave me alone. Yeah, so that was as annoying as dealing with, well, maybe not. So, with Machamp, it's the same deal. You can dynamic punch something. You know what happened when Azelf started running Colbur Berry to take less damage from Machamp's payback in the lead slot? Machamp decided, oh, I'll just dynamic punch it and hope I confuse. The fact that D-punch is so often the quote-unquote right move because it just gives you that 50%. It gives you such good odds. You wind up muscling your way through things you really shouldn't. And you say, well, if, the odds give you the chance to beat something, then it's not really an answer. Then I'm just going to say, okay, same difference. It's like a Scald scenario. Then there are not enough good answers. You can say, oh, there's not a way to rope Scald into this, right? If something isn't countered by something because it can Scald burn, that's not an answer. Okay, true. Then there are no good answers to Scald. That's the whole point. And the same applies very much to Machamp's Dynamic Punch. So, with Machamp D-Punch, I once again must reiterate, you just got to get confused once, max twice, and it is barraging you, and it just removes counterplay way too easily. And to say nothing of how good it is even without the RNG, but the fact that it introduces so much RNG into the game is what pushes it over the edge, in my opinion. So, now, with that idea that we don't need Machamp defensively, okay, sure. What about offensively? Does Machamp provide some sort of use that we really like in the tier? Is it some sort of wall breaker that we really appreciate for the potential in keeping defensive teams honest? Well, let's look at this. Machamp has low defensive utility and great damage, okay? So in this sense, it is very similar to other fighting types in the tier. Lucario and Infernape, those are the big ones because they are also frail. They're also faster, frailer but faster, so trade-off. And they also have a lot of other great traits. And they have great damage output. Lucario even has Swords Dance. Infernape has Swords Dance but doesn't really use it. Has Nasty Plot, doesn't even really need it. It's got a great secondary stab. So they're hitting hard, And if you're looking for more offbeat methods, Gallade and Heracross are legit. Gallade used to get used in serious games all the time. All the time is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was basically a Machamp lead that beat Machamp because it has Stab, Zen, Headbutt. And if you want use for it besides that, it has Zen Headbutt to destroy Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen started rising in popularity because it helped play around Machamp. And with Gallade, that's not really an option. So it also has a much higher, stronger stab move for Rotom. It has Shadow Sneak for faster Rotoms and Starmies. Great Pokemon. Heracross, great dual stab, very threatening. Decent Breloom check. So I'm not saying these are top tier, but then again, what is pushing Machamp into the top tier is not its power, it is the RNG. If you took the RNG away from Machamp, it would be just like these Pokemon. That is the whole point. It's a little stronger than them, okay, but if you weren't giving it the Dynamic Punch confusion, then it would just be, oh, it's a strong fighting type, who cares? It's good sometimes, sure, and we will demonstrate how it can be good without the need to hinge on RNG. And what really sells this point for me, though, what really drives it home, is that I mentioned those fighters because they don't have defensive utility. And obviously, the best fighting type in DPP is Breloom. DPP Breloom is the best because it has a ton of utility. It has way more utility defensively than Machamp. I won't even get into it. I made a video recently on the evolution of DPP Breloom that I'm sure goes into it about 1 million times over. But Breloom has a ton of utility. And here's the kicker. It is just as strong as Machamp. They have the same attack stat. And Breloom has a secondary stab. And Spore and Swords Dance and all this stuff, right? So, and it heals in sand. Incredible stuff, right? It has Mach Punch, for God's sake. It's a million times better at handling T-Tar than Machamp. So, in terms of power, Breloom is far better. Even if you took away Spore, even if you say, oh, well, Spore is broken. Okay, imagine that you have removed Spore. Breloom is still much more reliable than Machamp in terms of defensive utility and in terms of damage. It's hitting harder because of secondary stab, because of Sword Dance, because it's got other great moves like Facade. It's hitting harder in effect, not just because it has an equal attack stat and it can boost it further with what's it called, Sword Dance, and not even because it has superpower for its stab instead of dynamic punch. So that first hit, yes, it's weaker over time, but that first hit hits harder. But it's also hitting harder in effect because it gets to hit over and over again far more easily because it heals in sand. So, and it has that great defensive utility by virtue of that half-grass typing. So, with all this in mind, the reason Machamp is being looked at here is because the RNG alone pushes it, into the conversation with this Pokemon that would otherwise be far better than it. If there wouldn't even be a conversation. So the reason you are using Machamp in this vein over the superior Breloom, which is, it's similar speed, it's just as strong, all this other stuff, but you're using Machamp because of the RNG, right? So if you are using Machamp just for the RNG, that is undesirable. And what's more, we have also just demonstrated that if you take away this RNG aspect, or honestly, even with the RNG aspect, let's keep it like that, then we have just demonstrated with these other fighting types, there is plenty of powerful fighting type wall-breaking power. Literally, Breloom is just as strong as Machamp. So they are tied as the strongest fighting type, right? And in effect, Breloom is hitting even harder because superpowered Focus Punch, which it can use, whatever, Machamp can ignore Focus Punch too, but it doesn't. That's the whole point. Machamp has a stronger fighting move than Dynamic Punch. It has Close Combat. It does not use Close Combat because it's too busy going for RNG. So let's just keep the RNG in here, right? So you have all these other fighting types who are just as capable of putting the fighting type pressure on these bulky teams, if you really think that's an important niche, which it is, okay, sure. And if you take Machamp out, you're not going to lose that. Breloom is going to replicate. Breloom already does do that, my god. These other Pokemon, they have a million other ways that they can do these things. Now, does Machamp have its own unique little qualities that are nice? Yeah, okay, sure. Even if you take away the Breloom comparison. It does have those. And I think there is a way that we can preserve it. It's only a matter of policy. However, if it's a matter of Machamp or no Machamp, I would rather take no Machamp. Because we don't need it defensively and we don't need it offensively. And if someone says, oh, well, it's good to punish these teams, Machamp is not used super highly at the highest level, or super commonly at the highest level, because it's RNG dependent. The whole point is that you throw Paraspam, you load up Paraspam in whatever battle you have when you are trying to cheese someone a lot more than if you're trying to just, rely on your own skill. Why? Because if you are just relying on your own positioning and prediction and all that stuff, then you can just run Breloom. Or, one of the other fighters, but generally Breloom, because it's bulky, slow, it does similar things, but you can hinge on your own performance more. And with Machamp, you're like, oh, well, this gives me the opportunity to confuse them, better. So, we don't need its power, we don't need it, we don't need its RNG as an extra tool to compensate for whatever in terms of breaking through defense. We can do that without the RNG. Machamp can do that without the RNG. I would like the opportunity for a DPP metagame where we can use Machamp without RNG for its unique talents. But even if we got rid of Machamp full stop, then we can replicate this. Therefore, we have concluded we do not need Machamp. Therefore, we can reasonably consider a DPP metagame without Machamp. There are plenty of Pokemon the DPP metagame doesn't need, but you don't think about banning them because, or neutering them, whatever. You don't think about banning them because they are not offering some sort of malignant strategy that creates uncompetitive scenarios like Machamp parafusing or just confusing, and promoting bad play being rewarded. Other Pokemon are not like that. So, you could say, oh, DPPOU doesn't need Magikarp. It's like, okay, well, Magikarp also isn't causing any problems. So the point is, we do not need Machamp, and therefore, since it is often causing problems, we can consider a game without it. So, the game would improve without Machamp. Yes, I've just said that. However, I think this is a waste. Machamp, remember, we are pruning this metagame at this point. We can... not only can we do this in isolating the problematic element, just like I would prefer to do with Ironhead Jirachi, or just, ban the move Ironhead. I don't care that Scizor can't use it on Scarf anymore. Or ban 30% Flinch, whatever it is. I think we can do that. But for those of you who really like policy, then consider the fact that there's precedent in this. When we banned Dugtrio, we did not ban Dugtrio. We banned the ability Arena Trap. Now, if you are going to tell me that Arena Trap, Diglett, or Trapinch really needed to be prevented from use in the DPP metagame at all costs, I'm going to say, I agree that they shouldn't be allowed, because the less room you give for this nonsense, the better. And Arena Trap, rest assured, is nonsense. Not in the RNG sense, but in the matchup, the broken sense. Now, for Machamp, I mean, it's got a little bit of those too, but we're talking more RNG broken here. So, with Machamp's Dynamic Punch, it has already been demonstrated. Shake used to use Machoke Paraspam a few years ago and proved, yep, it's just as stupid. Xcal has played with a lot of Machoke Paraspam recently and said, yep, it's just as stupid. No, Machoke is not as good as Machamp. That is not the point. The point is that if someone really wants to still use parafusion stuff with Machoke, they will. And it will ruin games, because someone using this, this already applies when you use Machamp. The fact that it's Machoke is almost irrelevant. When you're using Paraspam with Machamp, you are not saying, oh, well, I'm going to try to outskill the opponent. You are saying, I'm trying to cheese the opponent. I'm trying to crank up that RNG. If you were trying to purely outskill the opponent, you wouldn't need to increase the RNG like that, because there are alternatives to Machamp that are similarly powerful in terms of wall breaking that are not contingent on RNG, aka literally Breloom, which is, better in terms of the longevity and the utility and all that stuff we've already gone over. So, the point is, there will always be players who say, you know what, I don't trust myself to win this game, let's raise the stakes RNG-wise. And that's why you have to cut down on the options for consistent RNG abuse. It's why Sandvale is gone, even though, oh, is Cacturn really a problem? Actually, yes, because someone is going to go out of their way to make it one. And that's why we shouldn't go after Machamp, in my opinion, but no guard, or honestly Dynamic Punch. Just take the option, because someone's going to say, oh, well, it's not no guard, but I'm going to use Dynamic Punch anyway, and just pray it hits, and with Parafusion, and they might para if I miss anyway. Just take it out of the equation entirely. There would be nothing lost of value there. So that way we can preserve Machamp. And there are interesting ways to use Machamp without relying on Dynamic Punch, I think. And I offer an example. Last year, Jesus Christ, I built a bunch of offensive teams that used that style, fast-paced offense with a mid-game or non-lead Machamp that specialized in threatening the opposition once they had been battered a little bit, once Stealth Rock and Sand had been introduced, so their options were no longer as dangerous. As capable of switching into it. So, what I did here, when sorry to my own horror or whatever, but I would like to demonstrate, this Machamp is not trying to just Dynamic Punch confuse its way through everything, because people will often say, oh, Machamp is supposed to punish slow, bulky teams, greedy teams, and I would counter to that, those are among the best teams at handling Machamp. If anything is going to withstand a repeated Machamp assault, maybe even drag those 8 D punches out of it, it's going to be teams with physically defensive Hippowdon, physically defensive Skarmory, physically defensive Reflect Latias, physically defensive Will-O-Wisp Rotom. Those are the physically defensive Jirachi. My God. If anything can switch around Machamp, it's those. So, with that, I must stress Machamp alone is not going to reliably break through these teams, and that is what I am offering here. With Bulk Up, you are not purely going through these teams with RNG. Obviously, you still use Dynamic Punch here because it's an incredible tool, but look at how Dynamic Punch suddenly threatens physically defensive Skarmory a lot more after a Bulk Up. So now you are pressuring them with actual extra damage. So that makes it a hell of a lot more reliable in terms of doing what it's theoretically supposed to do. You know, the people who say, oh, it punishes bulky teams. That's not true. It is more about those mid-range teams or offensive teams. You know, spreading paralysis is not hard. If anything is good at, withstanding that, it is the bulkier teams. So that is why on this team I put Bulk Up on it, because I like its defensive traits, but I also recognize, look, this thing needs help in terms of breaking down defense. It is not a defense breaker in and of itself. Therefore, Bulk Up. So let's imagine that No Guard has been wiped from the face of the earth, and so is Dynamic Punch. And, see, the thing didn't even go off there, the confusion. So let's just imagine that it doesn't exist there, right? Could you still use it as a Machamp? The answer is yes, very much so, because you use Guts instead of No Guard, and suddenly the Machamp actually becomes scarier in a sense, because why was my Machamp taking damage from Sand? Because I had Lumberry. Why? Because I was afraid of Will-O-Wisp Rotom, and you cannot be so threatened by Will-O-Wisp Rotom. And with Guts, suddenly, if Rotom Will-O-Wisps you, then you are able to, you get stronger. And you don't have to run Lumberry, and you run Leftovers, so you're not getting worn down by Sand. And you are actually hitting harder with your fighting stab because you're using close combat over a Dynamic Punch. Yeah, okay, the defense drop. Doesn't matter, you're trying to hit harder. And Machamp is bulky enough to where it works. And I like pairing it with Healing Wish anyway. It is going to get worn down. So, okay, it's like, okay, BKC, then why were you not using this set with a Dynamic Punch? Well, the whole point is that Dynamic Punch's RNG is so strong that it is going to outweigh this more position-based, form of using Machamp. You would rather have the extra RNG favoring you than going with the Dynamic Punch, than going with the extra power route, because it's just that strong. The RNG is just that high at 50%. My God. But I think it is very interesting as a possibility. Some people throw around, oh, Hariyama would be interesting as a Machamp replacement. Sure, maybe. I don't like that it's slower. I don't like that it's a little weaker, but I get the idea. It's cool. So, whatever the case is, this Machamp is more, it's an alternative, and it differs from the other fighters in that it's got that nice bulk, and it's got Guts, and it's got, all the nice things about it. It's unlike Breloom in the sense that it is not weak to fire or ice, and that is incredible for limiting what can revenge kill it. So, yeah, I think Bulk Up Close Combat, Payback, Ice Punch Machamp with Leftovers and Guts would be a great set. This is just one example. I'm sure we could run Choice Band Machamp to decent effect. The Choice Band Close Combat, yikes. So, yeah, that would be, I'm sure there's others, I'm not thinking of right now. Those are just two. So, Machamp could be viably run without No Guard and Dynamic Punch. And I think it would be a total waste to get rid of Machamp entirely when, yes, I would like Machamp's inherent traits to punish these defensive teams. But note how people say, oh, well, we need Dynamic Punch Machamp to punish these defensive teams. No, you want Machamp's inherent traits of being a strong, pretty bulky, just fast enough fighting type, and the Dynamic Punch RNG is what's pushing it over the edge in these scenarios. We should not be encouraging breaking through defensive teams with RNG. At least not RNG like this. It's not like you are skillfully fishing for one Ice Beam freeze over the course of 50 turns. That is something else. No, this is just click Dynamic Punch and pray. It's not the same thing at all. It rewards, mediocre play, bad play, wrong play. As far as there are objectively wrong plays, Dynamic Punch is one of the best ways to be rewarded for it, to not be threatened by it. So, not be threatened by it. You get what I'm saying. So, yes, we can still use Machamp, because why wouldn't we just get rid of... And the answer is policy, right? And those sticklers for policy, I mean, yeah, my least favorite thing. bureaucracy and, oh, the rules are like this. And it's like, well, we make the rules, and the rules are supposed to serve the game, and not the other way around. But yeah, point being that with these... if you get rid of the negative aspects of Dynamic Punch, you are not neutering Machamp into this worthless piece of nothing. Not only that, but even if you did get rid of Machamp full stop, you would still be able to replicate this. My God, like, you take this game I just had, Gallade could have done a lot of what this thing did. In matter of fact, use Gallade for that. Gallade's already great. So, Breloom, I'm sure, could have done something similar. So, Heracross, whatever. You get the idea. It doesn't have to be bulk up. It could be Swords Dance by Gallade. Whatever it is. And it's faster. And so, to reiterate the point, you do not need Machamp to do this in its current form. You do not need Machamp to perform this task with Dynamic Punch, with No Guard, with RNG. So, if we are really going to go down the road of, oh, well, it's not policy to blah, 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 and then, okay, get rid of Machamp, and then watch as some idiot saying, I can't win this game, I'm not possibly good enough, let me just pray with Machoke, starts ruining games. How could we have, why didn't we see this coming? I really, really hate that whole idea. Oh, well, wait and see if it's a problem. Haven't we learned by now? Haven't we learned from all the years of, what? This other thing is probably going to be broken because of the same reasons as this other broken thing. Like, look at the years of Baton Pass. But you know what? Let's wait and see. Let's wait until it ruins more tournaments. My God, how many... We know enough about the game at this point, especially these old metagames, that we don't need to... wait and see. Like it's some sort of unknown variable in a generation that dropped 2 weeks ago. Wait and see. I'm sorry, I think it's laughable. I really think that's just arguing policy for the sake of, I like being on the side of policy, I like debating because I did it in high school or something. I don't know, whatever your reason is, I don't think it's a good reason to, fly in the face of so much overwhelming evidence that this thing is already a problem, will continue to be a problem, because when you remove things that, aren't necessarily a problem yet but might become one, you don't ruin the tournaments. No tournament has ever been ruined by, overwhelmingly banning Baton Pass as opposed to waiting to find that perfect rule set where Baton Pass is just okay now, and instead of, letting it run loose. And no, you don't miss these broken elements. You will not miss Machoke. He's like, let's give Machoke a chance. It might be good for the game. It might not be broken. No, absolutely not. It's like saying, oh, well, Cacturn was broken with Sandvale, but you know what? Gabite might not be. So let's ban Cacturn, and we'll give Gabite a shot. We'll see if Gabite might be okay. Maybe Sandslash isn't so bad. We'll give them a chance. Absolutely not. You don't do it with Arena Trap. You don't do it with Sandvale. And my God, if Arena, because some people can go, oh, well, Arena Trap's not the same against a broken ability, then compare it to Sandvale, for God's sake. And if you don't want to make a No Guard, make a Dynamic Punch. And I think people are more open to. We have this weird pincer movement where people don't want to ban, or people are more comfortable with banning abilities, but No Guard isn't a broken ability. So, okay, so then ban the real RNG aspect of it, because Arena Trap is broken because you can't switch, Sandvale is broken because of RNG. Okay, well, the ability here isn't the RNG, it's the move. Oh, well, we're not as comfortable banning moves. And then... I don't know why the policy has to be so written in stone as to prevent this kind of thing. But yeah, that's why I propose, do something at least. There's no reason for us to continue making ourselves suffer with Machamp's continued Dynamic Punch promoting the kind of degenerate nonsense that it does. So if nothing else, get rid of Machamp. But I would beseech us to just have the sense to go after No Guard, go after a Dynamic Punch. That would be ideal, just to remove any, because I promise you there will be people in tournaments like I just described multiple times, because it's happened over and over where people are saying, well, I'm not favored, so let me raise the RNG and let me just pray with deep. People will do it, so you have to limit the possibilities they have to do it. Yes, you can always raise the RNG with stupid nonsense, but the whole point is that other forms of RNG are not nearly as reliable. If someone wants to try flinching everything to death with Gyarados Waterfall, let's say, yeah, sometimes it will work, Most of the time, it will not. You know, against a good player, good team. With no guard D-punch, or even just D-punch if you get rid of the no guard, I mean, I'm sure it would be. I would be fine with no guard. I would be totally okay with it. But someone will try, and you have to limit this kind of thing. So, that is pretty much everything I wanted to say. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in that comment section. And I look forward to the progression of this. I hope it goes somewhere. I hope that, and I will keep everyone watching who does not follow the Smogon forums abreast of the developments. I hope the next development will be a video saying, hey, we're testing Machamp, thank God. So, or no guard. Actually, no, I take it back. Well, I mean, I would be okay with that, but I would prefer no guard or ideally dynamic punch. Thank you so much for watching / listening. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.